welcome to the Moviescramble podcast, where, much like the film we're discussing today, we have been described as something of a horror comedy. Joining me today is a man who also has very hypnotic eyes, but he swears he's never used them for death or carnage. It's John. John, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Avoiding using my rictus grin today, but yeah, not too bad. Keeping myself immersed in movies and TV as much as I possibly can in between the annoyance that is a working life. But yes,
yeah, having to work for a living,
yeah. It does get in the way sometimes, but I try my best to make sure that I keep that nonsense to a minimum. How about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Really looking forward to chatting about this today. I think it's a film that I've definitely been unable to stop thinking about since I actually saw it in the cinema. So it's good fun to good fun to talk about it. And that film is, of course, The Monkey, which is the Osgood Perkins film from 2025. And the film is based on a short story from Stephen King that was released way back in 1980, but Osgood Perkins has picked it up and written the screenplay.
The coroner said it was an accident, but it was no accident. It was a monkey. When I was a kid, my twin brother and I found something that loved to kill. I did everything I could to make it go the fuck away. But it had other plans.
It centres around twin brothers, Bill and Hal, who find an eerie-looking toy monkey in the back of their father's wardrobe. They attempt to play with it, but it doesn't seem to do much initially. But when a series of unexplained and gruesome deaths occur, they wonder if they could be stemming from the mysterious toy. A death in the family causes a rift between the brothers, one that continues into adulthood. And despite their best attempts to destroy the monkey, it pulls the brothers back together one last time. That's a sort of rough outline without going into all of the chaos that ensues during this film. So the monkey obviously comes straight off the back of Longlegs, which was the tail end of 2024. Did that enhance your expectations going into this film?
Yes, definitely. If you recall, we spoke extensively about Longlegs in a previous pod. Look it up, people. It was a very good one. We had a very good chat on there. And we spoke about it obviously in terms of it being in the top 10s of the year. So we rated the film very, very highly. So to have something come out so quickly afterwards, sort of the expectation levels were reasonably high here because of the previous work and the fact that you know that a combination of the guy who directed Longlegs and Stephen King is probably a pretty decent pairing, let's face it.
Yeah, I didn't really know much about this particular short story, but to be honest with you, as soon as I heard that it was Osgood Perkins attached to it, I was like fully seated, ready to go. I think he's a really interesting director, and kind of almost no matter what he touches so far, I have really, really enjoyed. But yeah, having Longlegs at the back definitely made me think that this is going to be something quite exciting. So, and I think the film starts off with quite an elaborate sequence, I would say, in order to sort of get you in the mood. How, like, does that sort of, for you, did that set the tone for the rest of the film? Because I just remember sitting there going, what the fuck, when this started?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really giving too much away when you talk about the opening 30 seconds of the film, where what looks like an airline pilot runs into a pawn shop covered in blood with a monkey. And you think, something's going to happen here, and it duly does. Yes, it completely, that first 5-minute sequence, which is almost like a cold opening, isn't it, to the film?
Yeah.
It totally sets up the rest of it. It heightens your enjoyment right away, and you get a sense of what's actually going to come in terms of the story, in terms of the levels of gore and horror as well. You kind of get it nailed on right there, and you think, yep, I think I'm probably going to be pretty worried about this film. But yes.
Yeah, because I think what it does really nicely is it sets up that anticipation, because you obviously don't initially know why he wants to get rid of this monkey other than the fact that it looks freaky as hell. But then you've got these little cutaways that I love, and it's like the mouse like scrambling along the shelves, and it keeps cutting to that, and you're thinking, why? What does this have to do with sort of this scene? So I think it really builds the tension nicely, which I think sometimes you don't get in the deaths in this, and other times you do. So I think it was just a really nice way of introducing you basically to a splatter fest that occurs throughout the rest of the film. But I had mentioned, obviously, like the film was about two brothers. How did the casting choices sort of impact how you watch the film? Because I thought you've got Christian Convery as young Hal and Bill, and then Theo James is the sort of the adult versions of the twins. I thought the dynamic between them was really interesting throughout their sort of rivalry that goes beyond just being like sort of brothers of or twins of the same age. How did you think the performances were? How did that set up your enjoyment of the film? Did you like the sort of through line of basically they just hate each other for their whole lives?
Yeah, it's obviously a sort of classic twins setup in that you've got one that's more dominant than the other.
Yeah,
they are identical twins as well, which again can be a wee bit creepy.
Yeah,
it has been used before in films with obviously the likes of The Shining and stuff like that, where you've got the weird twins. Now you have an alpha male and you have very much a beta male in this as well, between the sort of dynamic between the two boys. And the the more dominant one is always going on about the fact that he partially ate all the placenta as well. So yeah, you've got this sort of downtrodden, sort of nerdy, bookish type who actually is the narrator as well. There's not full narration in the film, a sort of partial narration, which I think works very well. Yeah, I did like the way that the sort of dynamic between the two boys was set up, and like the fact that the sort of meeker one actually wanted to kill his brother as well, and that kind of set off like a whole, that was partially setting off the chain of events that sort of lead the sort of first half of the film, which I thought it was really good. But then the switch into adulthood, I did find the casting of Theo James a wee bit weird because he's a very good-looking man. So,
he's not geeky. Yeah.
And I liked the way that it was almost reversed when they became adults, in terms of he was the guy with the glasses, the brother with the glasses, is actually more sort of normal than what was it, Bill? So Bill became the sort of the recluse type of character and things like that. So yeah, I like that wee sort of switch, but kind of keeping the roles as well. Yeah, I thought it kind of worked. It made perfect sense when we switched from the boys to the men, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty clever the way they've done that, and they held certain traits as they got older, as you would, but sometimes that kind of thing is ignored, the way that their mannerisms and just the way that they actually speak as well. And it was very, very well done. I thought I kind of liked it.
Yeah, I like that sequence where Hal is obviously just holding the bowling ball over Bill's head, and like you don't know if he's actually like dreaming this or because he's obviously just so in his brother's shadow, and even at high school or school rather, he gets like picked on by a group of girls. It's not even that he's getting picked on by his brother, it's a group of girls and they like steal his trousers and they cover him in bananas and stuff like that. And it's just,
that was gross.
It was, wasn't it? It was just, it's such it makes you feel like instantly like really sympathetic towards this character, and you kind of can't understand why Bill is so cold towards his twin. But then as you see, I really like the sort of switch that happened as they got older, where albeit Hal's doing his best to have the most mundane life ever in order to avoid any more sort of death and drama. He works in a convenience store, I suppose they would call it in the States, and things like that. He obviously tries to keep his life like really sort of boring, whereas Bill has fallen down the Reddit rabbit hole really and has become this sort of recluse who's determined to get the monkey back, which I really liked as well. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, Theo James for me, unfortunately, will always be the guy from the In-Betweeners movie who ended up with shit on his nose. But he is obviously a very good-looking boy, and you kind of think sticking a pair of glasses on that is not really going to make that much of a difference, is it?
Yeah.
Were there any other performances that stood out for you? Because it is quite a small cast. There's loads of extras, do you know what I mean? But in terms of the sort of core cast, there's not really that many.
Yeah, I liked the actor who played Petey, the son of Hal. He was almost like Bill in a way, the way that he talked to his father. He was very sort of upfront, who's very sarcastic. Because the whole point of the second half of it, Hal is only seeing his son once a year for a week to try and minimize any sort of damage that may come from the fact that the monkey is still out there. And I know we haven't really touched on that at all, but he decides he wanted to take him away for the week and do sort of nice, it was a horror fest or something that we're going to go to, and obviously that goes to shit based on stuff that starts to happen. And it's Petey's reactions when he's like in the car with his dad and he finds out that his dad is a brother, and you know, and where he lived and all this sort of stuff, and then like the fact that he's twins and everything as well, and he's just like, are you shitting me? What is actually happening? Obviously his father has spent his entire life not telling him anything at all. The sort of bare minimum, and he's done that in such a way that he's trying to protect Petey. But a child is obviously naturally curious, and he has got this family tree project that he can't fill in properly because he hasn't got his father's side of the family, because he knows nothing about them. And it's just, it is pretty crazy. And he finds out all these facts based on some of the stuff we've seen, like to do with his mother and everything as well. So yeah, that's probably like one of the main sort of standout performances. But then again, there are so many in here, because you've got the actor who actually plays his mother, Tatiana Maslany, who I've seen in a few things, and she's brilliant in this. I mean, she just sits down, like there's an unfortunate accident, and there's a funeral, and she's sitting down with the boys saying, everybody dies. I'm going to die. You're going to die. It may be in your bed. It may be really horrible, and it's just really sort of this kind of flat delivery. There's no emotion to it. It's just all, you know, facts that she's actually putting out there and saying, this is going to happen to you. It happens to everybody. It may be a horrible one. And the kids are just kind of going, yeah, I know. So yes, I thought that was particularly good. But the whole cast, it was a very well cast film. I thought that there was even the minor roles, and we can sort of touch on those in a couple of minutes. But who were the standouts for you?
So I really liked Elijah Wood's performance. So he obviously is playing like Petey's stepdad, and I love that whole scene where you go in and he's got cardboard cutouts of himself. His books are up on plinths, and they're called things like Jesus' Dad, things like that. Yeah. And then you see them when they're sitting on the couch and they're all holding hands, and he's like, "You've just transferred your power to me." And you can see that Theo James is looking at him like, "Of what? Like, what are you talking about?" And he obviously, his intention is to adopt Petey. And he's like, nobody's going to stand away and sort of like the world's leading expert on like parenthood or fatherhood or whatever. And it's a small role, but I just thought it was really effective because he just comes across like completely obnoxious and sort of airy-fairy sort of new age parenting, where it's all about like transfer of power and things. And you can see actually from the brief sort of time that Elijah Wood and the Petey character are on screen together, you can see that's not his vibe either. Like, he actually does want to spend time with his dad and go to the horror con or whatever it was. And the Elijah Wood's character is just this totally overbearing, obnoxious, like probably talks in therapy speak, like all of the time, like one of those kinds. So I thought that was a really effective wee role and just a nice sort of surprise, because I remember seeing it and thinking, oh my God, that's so funny to see him in a role like this. But yeah, I just thought it was a really well executed sort of performance. I think we've obviously... I mean, we can't really go into this pod without talking about like spoilery type things. So the film has been out for a wee while. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, we're probably going to chat about them from here on out. The monkey itself, obviously, is the central part of this film. It's the toy that the brothers find.
Oh, no, it's not a toy. Never call it a toy.
Oh, beg your pardon. Yep.
They emphasise that a few times.
It's an agent of death and destruction at the centre of the film. I think there's a really nice, like, although obviously this is, as I say, it's a bit of a splatter fest, there is this kind of through line when you think about the monkey, about sort of like human nature and fear and fate, because the brothers, there is a scene obviously where we see Hal attempting to hack the monkey to death, and they throw it down a well and they assume that's the last of it. But obviously, for whatever reason, it puts itself back together and sort of follows them into their adult life. Do you think it is as deep as that? Do you think it is about a sort of like not being able to escape your fate, or do you think it's just this is just batshit and it's a haunted monkey that's coming to ruin your life, basically? Because there's no control over it. You can't tell it who to kill.
Yes, yeah, it just happens. It is kind of the randomness of life, I think it is, because anything can happen to anybody at any time, basically. So you just don't know what's going to happen. But like I say, that this particular device is an agent of chaos, and you don't know where it's come from. You don't know who had it before Hal and Bill's father, where he got it from. Does it just attach itself to people and stay there for as long as possible until there are no more people within that particular family? You just do not know. But yes, it kind of represents a lot of things. It is just the sort of standard, the evil that's lurking in the background and is always there. And it also represents some sort of unstoppable force as well. There's nothing you can do about it. You can try and ignore it as much as you can, and the only way to avoid it is to not turn its key. Now, that's easier said than done. You would think, well, you don't turn its key, but then when you involve the ego of people and the fact that they can have some sort of control over other people, where if it's people they know or if it's just going to be random strangers, then it's still control, and that sort of power appeals to people, so that therefore they will turn that key. They'll do that. It will eventually get into the wrong hands. Yeah.
And I think that's because Bill, obviously, in his adult life, has not maybe become the sort of big dog that he was. He's peaked in high school, as the phrase is. So for him, wanting that control back is absolutely a way of reclaiming the sort of former like glory days, as it were, of being the sort of, you know, big personality on campus. Whereas Hal obviously does have that willpower to say, I'm just not going to turn the key. I'm not going to. He's obviously separated from Petey's mum. You know, he only sees Petey for a brief sort of period of time. And so for him, the control that he has to impose on himself in order to keep everyone safe is very different from the control that Bill needs to feel by actually having the monkey back in his possession. But yeah, for me, I was just wondering, like, because they mentioned that their dad obviously brought them back trinkets from all over the world, because that's obviously another sort of dig that the mum has, because she has to go out on dates. And she's like, and one day you two are going to inherit all of the crap or whatever it is that's in the cupboard. So there is this notion that the dad sort of picked up kind of trinkety things, but you do wonder how he came into possession of the monkey in the first place, and where it had been sort of wreaking havoc before then, because it feels like there's obviously like not necessarily world building, but there's obviously much more of a story there, and we're only getting a wee snapshot of these two brothers having the possession of the monkey. So I thought that was a really interesting point. And as it says on the box, it says like life, not lifelike. So, and as you said, it's this notion that people do just die. And obviously the mum gives that speech and says, like, you know, it might be horrible or you might just die in your bed. But that's the kind of notion that even if you turn the key, does that absolve you of responsibility? If it's just like life, these things happen. I think it's got a really interesting, maybe I'm going too deep here, but I do think it's got a sort of interesting kind of like thematic points attached to it beyond the fun sort of like thrills and spills that this film obviously throws up.
Yeah, you can dig into these type of films. Horror films are usually analogies for all sorts of things. So you can dig into a horror film and basically pull out, much like the intestines, anything that you actually want. So yeah, and you can look at it that way, but that's the kind of beauty of these type of films, that you can treat it at a very sort of surface level, or you can go into it and say, well, it is like life in a lot of ways because it is very random and everything as well. On your point about the sort of the history of the monkey, I think it's done very well because you want to know where it came from and what the actual power it holds within it actually is. But by not knowing that, it's never talked about in the film. You don't get some wise old guy coming in and saying, I know
it's not Mogwai.
You don't get that. And because of that, it's left to your own imagination about where it came from. Was it always a monkey toy? Is it something that's possessed things? down the centuries or whatever, so you don't get any of that at all, and it's just left entirely to you, and all you are faced with is this. Well, at rest, it's an inanimate object. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there with this expression,
which is terrifying in itself.
Which is terrifying in itself. The more you see it, the more you get unsettled by it, and the film goes out of its way to make you feel as unsettled as possible when that thing is on screen. It really is. It lingers on the monkey when it's actually not doing anything at all.
I know, and I was just thinking, because I was reading that apparently there was like 4 or 5 like prop monkeys for the film, obviously like wear and tear, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I was like, I wonder if anyone on set ever turned around and was like, that thing's looking at me. Or like, do you know how you hear people like take props home from a film? Like, you would not be taking that thing home, would you? I just think it's so scary.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it's very well put together, the monkey itself, because it doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
and
it's
the same idea as looking at someone directly in the face for an extended period of time and not talking, and there's no expressions, and it just becomes more and more unsettling. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, there was a television advert for BT. It was maybe about 20 years ago. It was Bob Hoskins.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole advert was, well, the first 20, 30 seconds of the advert was him staring at the screen with his telephone beside him. And he wasn't saying anything. His expression was completely neutral. And the telephone was sitting there and it wasn't ringing or anything. And after about 30 seconds, he said, "It's uncomfortable, isn't it?" Can you imagine, like, just sitting there in complete silence? Can you imagine what that's like for like somebody that you know on the other end of the phone, and they just don't get any sort of contact with anybody whatsoever? And it was a really effective advert because it was saying, pick up the phone, speak to somebody, and sort of not so much make their day, but have a bit of human contact. And it was a really creepy advert because of that, because he was just sitting there looking at the screen. And it reminded me, the monkey thing, for some bizarre reason, reminded me of that, because it's not doing anything either.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like, though, is the sort of the soundscape attached to the monkey, and obviously the music that is used, because I think you obviously have that sort of like seaside song that it plays when it's banging on the drum, but I thought that the actual soundscape of like turning the key, and there's a lovely shot where it's almost as if you are the monkey banging the drum and you can hear the drumsticks really clearly. What did you think of that sort of did that contribute to the sort of creepiness of it all?
Yeah, of course it does. It's very deliberate in the way that there is a sequence of events that actually happen. So you turn the key maybe like 4 or 5 notches, and it's very deliberate. It's like click, 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 click. It's not like fast, so it's very deliberate. And then it takes ages for the monkey to actually do anything. It sits there for a long time, and then the rictus grin comes up, and then the paw goes up, and you think, oh, it's going to start playing it. But no, it spins the drumstick as well. So there's a whole sequence, and it's just building us up and building us up. And then, like you say, it starts playing I Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside. It's drumming along to it, and it's so bizarre. The fact that they use that wee sort of happy tune that you think of as sort of end of the pier organ kind of stuff. It's so out of place, but it works really well because of that, because of the abstract nature of what it's actually doing and what the sort of the meaning behind it all is. The fact that when it finishes, something is going to happen, and it's not going to be pretty at all. It's going to be quite gruesome, shall we say? Yes,
and it doesn't always obviously hit the last sort of drum stroke, doesn't always happen straight away as well. So you're also waiting for that. And then I was reading that the book is actually a monkey with cymbals, but apparently Disney owned the copyright to that because there was a monkey with cymbals in one of the Toy Story films, which is why Osgood Perkins switched it up to the drum thing. But I definitely think that works, that whole notion that he's striking the drum and at the same time he's sort of snuffing out somebody else's life. The body count obviously is pretty high. Did you have a favourite death scene? Can you have a favourite in this sort of film?
There were obviously a number of them, But my favourite had to be the very first one in the pawn shop, just because it set things up for later on in terms of it. It's a number of elements involved. Like, say, there was the mouse or the rat chewing through a piece of rope, which then pushed something and it hit against, there was a diver's outfit with a spear gun, and the spear gun just shot directly into this guy's stomach, the guy behind the counter. And then if that's not bad enough, then it retracts it, and when it retracts it retracts all the entrails. And it goes on for ages. And the father, who's standing there already sort of splattered with blood and everything, he's just standing there looking at it, because this isn't his first rodeo. This has happened before. So I really liked that one. I thought that was particularly inventive. And it, like I said before, it sets the scene for the other deaths as well. So what about yourself?
I think it's a toss-up between, I really like the estate agent lady, who obviously you know that because she's trying all these different keys in the door, you're like, something's behind that door, I just know it. I obviously wasn't prepared for her to like be splattered all over the walls. And then there's that lovely, like, it turns back round and you see in the cupboard there's a sign that says, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people." Which is like really like such a funny touch. But I also really liked I thought the aunt's death was like proper Final Destination stuff. Like, she obviously fell through the stairs into the fish hooks and then put rubbing alcohol in her face, and you just knew she was going to go up on fire. But then I didn't see it come that she was obviously going to like basically like put her face through the mailbox as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
after
it was
putting
like,
her foot through it in a plant pot or something.
It was like a death of several parts. So I thought that was like not funny, but just the build up to it. Obviously you were like, this cannot get any more ridiculous than the previous injury she's inflicted upon herself, but it does. So I thought those two were particularly well done. As I say, that scene where it turns back round to the wee sign inside the cupboard, I thought was like a proper touch of class. But was there any that sort of, or scares or whatever, that kind of caught you off guard? Because I think this is a film that, for all it's quite bloody, it does rely on a lot of humour. But was there anything you just thought, oh, that's a bit like that, I wasn't expecting that?
There was the one where the babysitter is sitting in the Japanese restaurant. I wasn't really expecting that, and the way that was a very sort of Final Destination type death, and it reminded me a wee bit of the first Resident Evil film as well, because there's a corridor scene there with lasers, and that was quite unexpected. I didn't expect that to work that way. I thought, obviously there's knives involved. I thought maybe it'd be like one through the forehead or something like that, kind of idea. But no, the way that they did it, and then she just turns to the side and it kind of slides off. And I thought I was kind of going, oh! It was very unexpected. It really was. What about you?
No, that's the one I was thinking of, because she turns around and you just see that faint line of blood appear across her throat, and then her head's literally on the grill. And I was really shocked at that, because the first death that we see obviously is that one in the shop, and it is like, the guts getting pulled out. That one did actually really scare me, because it's her face as she turns around to face Hal, and her head literally just slides off of her body. I thought that was actually quite horrific. But then that's met with the contrast straight away of like her funeral, and the priest is like basically like, shit happens, but no it doesn't, because God has a plan. So I actually really like the fact that humor sort of undercuts basically everything in this film. Did the black humor sort of work for you?
Yeah, that scene particularly, I like the priest. Obviously there's a couple of scenes with the priest, and he comes on to the pulpit and he actually goes, whoa, fuck, right away, and that's totally changes the tone of it. And then he says, it could happen to you, or it could happen to you, and he's like, he looks at the mother, and the mother's like, just the expression she gives, she's kind of going, what the actual fuck? You're not supposed to do that sort of thing. And then obviously there's later on where they get kind of adopted by, I think it's their uncle. And that is actually Oz Perkins.
Yes.
With that part. And he's there's a sort of a comedic moment there because obviously the two boys are grieving and stuff, and there's a comedic moment because he says, yeah, come and live with us, but we're swingers. You go, what? It was just one of these things, and it's just totally blank in the way that he says it. It doesn't emphasize it in any way. It's just normal conversation, and he's telling this preteen boy about what they got up to with everybody. But there's a lot of comedy right the way through this. It's a very funny film. It's like the character of Hal, the older Hal, and he's trying to make sure his son does the right thing by saying, you shouldn't be swearing and all that sort of stuff. And it's just, with all the stuff that's going on around him, and he's saying, don't cuss. It's not the way you should behave and all that. It's just, very, very good. It's nice. It really is.
I did really like the scene as well where Hal's talking to the supervisor in work, and it's the sort of young guy, and everything he says, he just goes, shit, man, that sucks. And that's the standard response to absolutely everything. And then, of course, when he meets his demise with a vape in the neck, his last words are, shit, man, that sucks. So I thought that was really well done as well. So, yeah, and apparently the book is not like that. Apparently the book is like more serious. As I say, I haven't read it. So I think it definitely brings something fresh to the story. Obviously, if you've read it, where would this rank for you maybe in terms I feel like it's hard to say Stephen King adaptations because I feel like a lot of them are straight sort of scary or kind of thriller type of things, but whereas I feel like this does bring something genuinely new to the table.
Yes, like you say, it's abstracted from the story, and that's pretty much a good thing, because if you just do a straight version, then you will get the horror scares and things like that, but it will just be ranked alongside a lot of other faithful adaptations of King's work. And the fact that it's not makes it stand out, really, because there's an awful lot of adaptations out there that are okay. They're very watchable, like the Tommyknockers and all this kind of thing, but they are straight retellings, and you know what to expect in them, unfortunately. Whereas here, you've got no clue how it's going to go from one to the next. You know there's going to be a start, a middle, and an end, but you really don't know how it's going to get there and what the body count is going to be. I mean, the whole thing about the middle section of it where Bill is actually turning the key all the time, and there's just complete chaos everywhere in the town and everything, to such an extent that there's cheerleaders going to every death scene, so it's elements of that make it really sort of stand out from other Stephen King adaptations. Do you know if he liked it?
Do you know, I don't know, because it's one of these things where I just thought, not only because I obviously had a wee quick look at the book, obviously does play it really straight, and I also thought it was a really different style for Oz Perkins, because if you think about like Gretel and Hansel, Longlegs, and the Black Coat's Daughter, they've all been really dark as well. There's maybe been a couple of lines that you sort of tittered at, it was sort of nervous laughter, but I feel like this is really different for him as well. So I don't actually know. I mean, I have to say, Stephen King is usually super supportive on social platforms of work that he enjoys. I can't see him coming out and being disparaging about this, especially because it did perform quite well at the box office, I think.
Yeah, I think it did. It's been a bit of a success. It definitely has. But there's just reading there's a wee bit about his approach to the materials. Apparently, it was a straightforward horror story to begin with, the original script of it. And he says, I took liberties like a motherfucker on this one. Said that the script was very, very serious, and then he was saying, it's a toy monkey. There should be comedy in this. It should be more than just death after death and gore and everything. It needs to be a lot more crazy. It needs to be more insane. And he just said you should approach these things with a smile, because everybody dies and everything like that. So it moved quite dramatically from the original script, but I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that Perkins does have quite a distinct style from what we've seen, and this varies from it slightly, as I say, because it is definitely more comedic. But even like when they were doing like the premieres and things like that, it was just everybody dies written over and over again on a sort of like platform thing, and obviously the cast were standing in front of that, and so that kind of intrigued me as well, because you could have taken that in a sort of sinister way, but he's obviously taken it in a sort of light-hearted way, and I think we definitely see that where, like, for example, when his character dies and they say it was a hunting accident but not a regular one, he was strangled to death. And then they say that when they found him, it looked like somebody had drop-kicked a cherry pie, and of course you just get this sluice of
that was
internal
disgusting.
organs being dropped out. I thought, imagine writing your own death and doing it so gloriously. Like, I thought that was really, really cool. So I think for me, it definitely is. It's so enjoyable. It's like, it's one of these things you would call it like an enjoyable romp, as it were. But I definitely think it's a great addition to Perkins' body of work. Would you agree, even though it's so different to what he's done before?
Yeah, he's kind of placing a marker by saying, this is what I did with my previous film, and this is what I've done with this one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, guess what I'm going to do next? You know, so you just don't know where he's going to go. You can tell there is a certain style involved with the way that the film is actually shown and the way that portrays these sort of small towns and the unsettling characters and everything, but they're very, very different beasts, and that's only a good thing. If a director can show that he can still work within the horror genre but produce two films of such different styles, that is obviously a very, very good thing. So I would be very interested to see what he does next. I don't think he'll come in about another 4 months or so, but I think...
Well, you are... So his next film, called Keeper, is due to hit cinemas in October this year.
Wow.
And the plot line says it's about a couple who escape for a romantic anniversary weekend at a secluded cabin, only to be haunted by a presence of an unspeakable evil that unveils the cabin's horrifying secrets. I mean, I'm in.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. Yep. It has done particularly well, the film. It's made nearly $70 million, wow. Which I think the film only cost around $10 million to make. So, yeah, it's definitely washed its face. Yeah, so that in itself means that he will be free to do whatever he wants with his forthcoming films, because if he can turn a bit of a profit on such a small film, then he will be given the artistic freedom to go nuts with these things.
And he doesn't strike me as somebody who would work on a film where he wasn't given that freedom. Actually, like, he's never going to be a Marvel director or sort of franchise director, I don't think, just because he's somebody that clearly enjoys very much putting his own stamp on things, I think. And I don't mean that in a derogatory. I'm not saying he's never going to have like a big massive film. I just think that for him, obviously having this, even just with this film and being able to, as he said, take liberties, I think it strikes me that that's really important for him to be able to do his own thing.
Yeah, it was interesting in an article that I read where he said when he sort of came out of school, he went to uni and did directing. He wanted to be a director. That was what it was all about. And he says, for whatever reason, it didn't happen right away. They didn't actually get to direct something like big until he was 41. But in the interim, what he realised with all the stuff that he was working on as an actor, that the screenplay is king. He says, if you have a good screenplay and you have it refined and you know what you're going to do with it, that's the centre of everything. If you have the words down on a page, then everything else will follow from that. So he obviously took his time getting into directing, and he knew what he had to do in order to do it. And I think that kind of shows, one, by the speed of his work, and two, by the quality of the product that he's actually bringing out as well.
Yeah, and I think that because he's not tied to like major studios or franchise and stuff like that, there is a sort of flexibility and agility there that means he can, like, for example, he can have a film coming out in October this year, you know, just after one's hit screens in the start of the year. So I think that that's fascinating to know that the screenplay is at the heart of everything he does, because I think you can tell that. I think everything he's been involved with to date has had a very, very strong script. And whether you like his visual style or not is almost irrelevant, because actually the base of having that really good script is there for sure.
Yeah, and there's a whole thing about less is more as well, because if you think about Longlegs, it was all built up on the character of Longlegs and the Nick Cage performance. He was on screen for what, 15 minutes most?
Maybe.
He was hardly on there at all. And with this, the main antagonist is the monkey, and you know nothing about it. You get you only get the very sort of bare information based on the fact that they've figured out people die whenever the monkey bangs its drum, and that's it. So it's very much, keeping it tight, very much less. The less you know, the more your imagination runs wild.
Well, that's it, and the scarier it gets, and that's why obviously the marketing campaign for Long Legs was so successful, because he wasn't seen. And in this case, it's because essentially the monkey doesn't come with instructions. So it takes them a while to work out that you can't ask it to kill a specific person, or that when you turn the key, that's when or it has to, drop the final drumstick, and that's when the bad thing happens. Like, I like the fact in a way that you're sort of discovering it alongside Hal and Bill, how this thing actually works, because as I say, it doesn't come with a guide.
No, definitely not. Yep.
So is there anything else you would like to touch on for the monkey?
No, I don't think so. I think I've kind of covered most of the stuff that I had written down. It was ideal. It's a good film. So yeah. Yes. What about yourself?
So I was going to say, I take it you would just recommend for anyone that's looking for a sort of horror comedy splattery type of film.
Yeah, it's one of these films that you give it a chance. Give it a watch, because it will engage with you right away. You may think that you know what you're going to see here with a film about a monkey banging a drum, but it doesn't do exactly what you think it's going to do, and the journey's really good on this one. So I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I definitely would as well. I think that there's so much sort of black humor in this that appeals to me, and some of the deaths are really imaginative. I think if you want to find out 50 different ways to die on screen, this is definitely one to check out. So I think it's really good fun, and as I say, I actually cannot wait to see his next film as well, just to see where that goes. So that's our thoughts on the monkey. And to follow that up, it's really hard to tie in films to this particular Perkins offering, because it is just absolutely batshit. So we decided we would look at 3 films that have animals in their title, regardless of genre, style, whatever. So, John, do you want to give us your first pick?
Sure. My first pick is the 1998 film Snake Eyes. Now, when we talk about animals, we're obviously talking about the whole animal kingdom. We're not talking about mammals or anything like that. So I think only because we can involve all sorts of things. Anyway, this is a Brian De Palma thriller where it's set in Atlantic City in the night where there's a major boxing match going on, and there's also a tropical storm happening at the same time. Attending the boxing match is the Secretary of Defense, and he has an entourage, including Commander Ken Dunn, who is part of his entourage, who is looking after him and making sure that he's safe. Unfortunately, that doesn't really happen, because in the first round of the boxing match, the Secretary is assassinated while he is sitting beside this woman in a blonde wig who is whispering to him. And all hell breaks loose from there. Also in the auditorium, sitting just in front, is a local Atlantic City detective, Nick Santoro, played by Nicolas Cage. And he is called upon to investigate the crime and everything that's going on around it. Now, De Palma is known for his love of Hitchcock, and he has taken elements of Hitchcock in several films. This is one of the more obvious ones. There's lots of long tracking shots, weird camera angles, cross and double cross and triple cross, and there's all sorts of things going on here. And in the middle of it, there is Nicolas Cage doing his corrupt cop act, which is really, really good. It's just a fantastic movie. It's like shot in a very particular way, and the look of the film, it's all nice and glossy and everything, and just everything about the whole production just sort of screams quality, and it just makes you really want to watch it. And then on top of that, you've got this fantastic score by Ryuichi Sakamoto as well, which is just fits in totally perfectly with everything that's going on. Now, don't get me wrong, the film is trashy as hell. It's it's not subtle in any way. Some of the elements to it, like Nick gets beaten up at one point, and that's really stupid looking because and the mere fact that he's getting beaten up by one of the boxers that was in the ring when all this started off as well is not lost on you. This is not a film that you're going to be taking particularly seriously, but it's a really enjoyable sort of fun ride, I would say.
I have not seen that, but you've completely sold it to me. I mean, Nick Cage is a corrupt cop. You could have stopped right there and been like, "Yep, sure, no problem."
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good cast. It's obviously Nick Cage, Gary Sinise, Carla Gugino.
Gary Sinise. Oh.
Yes, yeah, I know. This is sort of pre-CSI days as well. So yeah, it's a really good film, and it's a pretty decent, extensive cast, which you kind of expect in a film that sort of homages Hitchcock, but you would watch it and you would go, "That's from that film. That's from, yeah, that's from Rope." Yep, and all this sort of stuff, because there's lots of like single takes and long shots and all that as well. So it's very, but it's good. I mean, I'm not criticizing it in any way for using those sort of elements, because it works and he knows what he's doing, and he's not trying to hide it by saying he's trying to do something different. It's very much this type of thriller that we occasionally get these days. Not as often as I'd like, but yeah, it's good. So
my first pick is quite a change in tone from that. So I'm going to go with a film that, quite honestly, I would die on a hill for. Like, I love this film so much. It's from 1986, and it is The Great Mouse Detective. When I had this on video, because I'm that old, it was definitely called Basil the Great Mouse Detective, but now it's just The Great Mouse Detective. So this is a Disney film, which I believe is an underrated classic. It's basically Sherlock Holmes, but told with animals. Sherlock Holmes, obviously, he does feature in the film, but Basil is a mouse, voiced by Barry Ingham. And he has Professor Dawson, who helps him out. And basically, he is confronted with a case where a toy maker has been kidnapped by Professor Rattigan, who's voiced by Vincent Price. And that alone should sell you on this film, whose plan is to sort of usurp the coronation of a new mouse queen. So for me, I mean, as I say, Vincent Price's voice work should be enough to sell you on this. He has a great song where they all sort of toast Rattigan, but you're absolutely not allowed to call him a rat, because that is punishable by death. He has a giant cat that he keeps to feed anyone to that insults him. There is a bat called Fidget, who has this like hilarious little laugh, but also gave me one of the biggest jump scares of my childhood, where they put him in a sort of like frilly baby hat and put him in a pram, and he jumps out at Basil and Dawson. And to this day, that jump scare still gets me, because it's really scary. There's like twee Scottish accents, like Olivia, the little girl in it. I'll always remember she walks around saying, "They've taken my daddy." And actually, that girl who voiced her was from Edinburgh, but they've obviously told her to sort of ham up the Scottishness. I mean, she's walking around basically in a tam o' shanter and a kilt for the vast majority of the film, like in case you didn't get where she was from. But I think it's great storytelling, really good animation, and it obviously just gets lost in amongst all the other Disney that was coming out at that time. I mean, 89 was, I think, Little Mermaid came out, so this is just a few years before that. So this is a childhood classic for me that, as I say, I'll die on the hill as to how good I think it is. I rewatched it a few months ago and I just thought, yep, holds up, perfect. And yeah, it's on Disney Plus, so highly recommend if you've not seen it.
Nice.
Definitely a Disney worth seeking out.
Excellent. That's a really good choice. I've not seen that film for years and years. But just you mentioning all the various characters and the fact that Vincent Price is in it, that's just amazing. That's just brilliant, yeah. Oh, man.
And he's such a, obviously he's a very good bad guy, but in this in particular, I think, because obviously it's a kid's film as well, and you're used to seeing him in this sort of like bloody sort of horror films, and so for him to be, as I say, he's a giant rat, but you're not allowed to call him that. And I love the scene where he rings his little bell and you hear the thump of the footsteps, and it's just this massive cat. So yes, highly recommend if you've not seen it. It is on Disney Plus, and it's well worth the watch.
Nice. Talking of Scottish accents, I watched an episode of The Saint during the week there, and it's the ones that are re-showing in Talking Pictures TV. And the episode was set in Malaysia, but obviously wasn't. It was like a backlot in like Cricklewood or something like that. You could really tell it wasn't. One of the things he was doing, he was trying to get money back from a guy, or get money back for a guy who'd been swindled out of like thousands of pounds. And the guy was Scottish, and he had this terrible Scottish accent, and it was all this, oh hi, you know, this sort of stuff, you know, and it was awful. And I actually looked up the guy on IMDb, and it turns out he came from Glasgow, but obviously his Scottish accent wasn't Scottish enough, so he had to do this real sort of, and it was terrible. It was really cringeworthy. It was awful.
Yeah. There is nothing worse than hearing your own accent back at you. As I say, when I watched Sight Run last night, I thought Saoirse Ronan's been smart here by not trying to do Orcadian and by keeping it sort of central belt, but there is nothing worse. But as I say, the voice actors in this are actually Scottish. They're supposed to be, but again, they've obviously been told to sort of ham up the Scottishness of it. So, yes, so your next pick?
My next pick is moving swiftly away from anything as nice as Basil, the Great Mouse Detective. My choice is the 2018 spy thriller Red Sparrow. It's directed by Francis Lawrence, and it stars Jennifer Lawrence. The two team up again after the Hunger Games films. This followed on directly from it. It's a cast of thousands, as with a lot of films these days. Obviously, alongside Lawrence, you've got Joel Egerton, Matthias Schoenaerts, Charlotte Rampling, Mary Louise Parker, Jeremy Irons, and Kieran Hines in various roles. I know, it's pretty crazy. It's set in modern day Russia, and Jennifer Lawrence plays the part of Dominika, who is a ballerina who is subject to an accident, rather a painful one, where her leg gets broken, and it turns out not by accident. It's a jealous fellow dancer. So she takes revenge on them. Her uncle is part of the Secret Service in Russia, I should say, and he facilitates this for her, and then he kind of co-opts her into becoming a spy carrying out a mission, which she's not told exactly what's going to happen. And it turns out that the man that she is meeting, who is a Russian industrialist, is actually getting set up for an assassination, which actually happens. So then she is sent away to spy school, where it's Charlotte Rampling doing her best Russian accent. I should say there are quality Russian accents throughout. It's all, da, comrade, all this sort of stuff, all the way, all of them. So she's sent to this course, which is where they create sparrows, which are these very charismatic and good-looking people who are able to infiltrate into conversations and set up sort of honey traps and all this kind of thing. At the same time, Joel Edgerton is an American spy who works for the CIA, and he's trying to protect one of his assets that nearly got burned in Moscow, and it's like a sort of high-level asset that's feeding the CIA information about what's actually going on in the Kremlin. So there's a whole story about trying to uncover the mole, which Dominika is sent to do by getting into the life of the Joel Edgerton character. And there is also the whole thing about, you know, who's fooling who here. Is the CIA running her, or she, and the Russians running them? So it's back and forward and all that. There's quite a bit of nudity in this film, actually, with Jennifer Lawrence as well. There's a few sort of, not like graphic sex or anything, but there's a few scenes where people are nude and things like that as well. And it's a kind of a twisty, turny spy flick, which you can take at face value and say, yeah, it was okay, or you can sort of really get into it. And I like the film. I think it's a pretty good entry into the sort of thriller genre. It's not going to be for everyone because of the accents, but the quality cast, they completely buy into it. Especially Jeremy Irons. He does Russian very well. He's very good as this very dry, unapologetic sort of general type within the Russian military. Is very, very good in it. But there's not a bad performance in it. But it is a bit silly, I must say. And there's a lot of pretty decent action as well, which is not unexpected, I suppose, because obviously with Jennifer Lawrence coming off of the back of the Hunger Games film, she did certain amount of the stunts and all that as well. But if you're looking for something entirely serious, I would avoid it. But yeah, I did kind of like it.
I remember seeing it in the cinema because it's one of these films where you know it's a thriller set in Russia because it's that sort of washed out look the whole way through it. I remember thinking it was okay at the time, but yeah, everyone has committed to the bit in terms of accents. Which, do you know what? I actually appreciate sometimes in a film like that where they could just be saying like comrade in an American accent or an Irish accent, whatever they have. But the fact that they've all committed to, nope, we're going to do this with the Russian accent, I actually quite like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got no problems with it at all. Definitely not.
So my next pick is quite a controversial one, not for the pod, but it was a controversial film at the time. So this is the 1971 Sam Peckinpah film Straw Dogs, in which I appreciate has been remade with James Marsden, of all people. Basically, this film stars Dustin Hoffman and Susan George, and Hoffman is the astrophysicist David Sumner, and he wants to move to Britain with his wife to sort of get away from escalating violence in the States, only to find himself in an absolutely horrific situation, Middle England. There is always that scene where he walks into the pub and it's like everyone turns around and stares. And if you've ever moved to Eaglesham, that's basically how it feels here as well. So basically he asks a bunch of locals to do some construction on his house, and it sort of escalates into violence. And obviously there is a very controversial rape scene in the film as well. So for me, it sort of captures that kind of sweaty, grimy, violent 70s cinema style perfectly. And obviously with it being Peckinpah, there's lots of like really well executed violence. There's like bricks coming through windows and all that sort of thing. So I really like Dustin Hoffman's performance in this as well. I think he is absolutely flawless because when we first meet David, he's sort of gentle, nerdy, conflict avoiding. Obviously that's his reason for moving to England, and he's basically pushed to the brink. And I think it's one of these films that sort of asks you what you would do if you were in his position, because obviously the locals at first sort of tried to pass off his complaints as like nothing. Essentially, you've got Peter Vaughan and Jim Norton, who are completely creepy and odious in this film and just really horrific. And I just think it's that sort of small village, hostile to outsiders trope that sort of ramped up by a million. And obviously, as I say, there was a very controversial sort of sexual assault scene that takes place as well. I, having watched this film again not that long ago, I think it holds up completely. I think the performances hold up. In particular, as I say, I think Dustin Hoffman is excellent in this film. But the sense of dread that it imbues in you know, it's not this quaint little English village. In a way, it sometimes almost reminds me of like The Omen as well, that kind of English setting. But I think it is definitely infused with that sort of, as I say, that kind of grimy, violent, sort of American style cinema that was obviously quite prevalent at the time. I think it holds up. I think the performances are great, and I think it's just a really excellent tight drama. Like, there's not a massive cast, there's not a, you know, but it uses tension really well. It sort of ramps up the violence slowly. There is a couple moments where you're like, well, is this going on or is it not? And then, as I say, obviously there's a huge controversial violence in it. I don't know how much more I can say without giving too much away. I think it's a brilliant film worth seeking out if you haven't seen it already. But I feel like this is a cinema staple for quite a lot of people.
Sam Peckinpah obviously had a certain reputation by that point in his career with the types of films that he was doing, and there was always controversy surrounding them. Yeah. This is a fantastic movie. Like you say, it does still hold up after all these years. Basically because of the way that it was made. It's very, like you say, it's very economical. It doesn't waste a lot of time. There's no extraneous scenes here, and there is a certain sense of dread about it. Now, the controversy about the film itself kind of takes away from the power of the film a wee bit itself by, like, I think it was kind of wrapped up in the video nasties and all that as well when it came out in video, wasn't it? It was one of these ones that was, people shouldn't be seeing this on video when it came out. So, it is a very good film. It's not one that you can say you can enjoy in any way, but it's one that is definitely a film that you should see. If you're going to see any Sam Peckinpah films, then this is one of the ones that you should definitely be seeking out. It's a very good pick indeed. And it has a dog in the title. Yeah, well done.
There you go. And your last pick for us?
Yeah, for my last pick, I was going to go with Israeli film Big Bad Wolves, but I couldn't find a copy of it to see, to remind myself about it, because it's been maybe about 10 years since I've seen it, which is a bit of a shame. I will save that one for a future top 3, and I will seek it out. So what I did instead was have a quick look through Amazon Prime to see what was on there, and I came up with The Butterfly Effect from 2004.
Good shout, yeah.
Which I had not seen for, again, it was about 10, 15 years. And I watched it last night after doing my due diligence and watching The Monkey and the extra bits in The Monkey that I'd wanted to sort of review again. So The Butterfly Effect is a 2004 science fiction-ish thriller, wee bit of horror elements in it as well. It stars Ashton Kutcher, Amy Smart, Eric Stoltz, William Lee Scott, and Logan Lerman in a very sort of early role. Kutcher himself, he plays a college student, Evan, who has been experiencing blackouts and memory loss since a young child. And he has figured out a way to unlock the memories of these blacked out periods, which basically involves reading from a journal that he started to keep as a young boy. And when he starts reading the journal out loud, things start to flash about around him, and he basically goes back to the previous version of him and what actually unfolded. Now, he figures out that if he can go back, he understands that changes can be made. Therefore, the butterfly effect, you make one small change in the past, or you make one small change and it affects everything that happens after it. He figures this out because he goes back to a traumatic event and ends up with a cigarette burn on his stomach, because he's standing there watching something happen and the cigarette falls out of his mouth and goes onto his sweatshirt. And when he goes back to the present, this burn is still in. He says, I can start changing things. So his sort of pre-teen period was very traumatic. His father was mentally ill, and the people he hung about with were not all that great, and things happened. Like Eric Stoltz's character, he was a pedo, basically, and he got the kids to do things on camera, which was pretty horrific, which is quite a turn for a science fiction film in 2004. Yeah. It's not exactly what you're expecting. So he figures that he can go back and change things, and he goes back and he makes slight changes, and his present then changes, and it's all the stuff that happens because of what he's changing. And different things happen with different iterations, going back to different places and all that. And it never actually seems to be totally perfect. It's like, trying to sort of patch the past in order to make the present better. It's mainly to do with the girl that he loves, who ends up in all sorts of horrible situations based on her past and how he actually helps her out or doesn't help her out. And it's just this cracking wee tight thriller, and the fact that there's all these different elements. I mean, he ends up in prison at one point because of something that happens when one of the futures is changed by him altering what happens to the brother of the girl that he loves and all this. So there's like 4 or 5 main characters in it, and it's just this sort of back and forward about how changing things doesn't really have the desired effect. And Ashton Kutcher is actually pretty decent in it because he has to play different versions of himself. He has to he's thrown into these different situations where he's he's like a college kid, but he's living in dorms with sort of all these oddball people, all these normal people. And then like in another existence, he's actually like in one of the fraternities and he's one of the main people in there. And it's the way he dresses and the way he looks and all that as well. And it works really, really well. He actually comes across as a pretty decent actor, and I think you forget about that because of his sort of later rom-com stuff and things like that. It doesn't really stand him in good stead. But that film, which I think was an introduction to a lot of people to him as an actor, stands up really well. Now, for the benefit of Simi, which I'm sure you already knows, there is a Butterfly Effect 2 and 3. There's
of course,
a whole trilogy there, and it is the laws of diminishing returns with these films, because the first film had a certain amount of shock value because it was something you hadn't seen, but you can't really do that with subsequent films because it's already been set up how you do it. But yeah, decent movie. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I forgot that existed, actually, until you mentioned that again there. But yeah, I remember, I think that was like one of the very early 12 or 12As that I had been to see at the cinema. I think that was when it came out. But I do remember that being quite, and it's become a sort of, that's become like the phrase now, isn't it? Like, I don't know if that was like something that existed before that film or not, but that has become the kind of, the butterfly effect has been the phrase about changed in the past. Yeah.
Yes, it comes from, I don't know if it's actually like Chinese philosophy. If a butterfly flaps its wings halfway around the world, it causes a hurricane or a tornado or something. It's just the sort of cumulative effect of things. One small ripple changes everything, basically. So yeah, it comes from that. But yes, I think most people refer to the butterfly effect in terms of the film now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same way with Spider-Man and Voltaire, obviously.
Yeah, I know that. Honestly, I couldn't resist posting that. That was so good. My last pick, I've gone for a classic. So the last one that I've gone for is Cat on a Hot Tin Roof from 1958, based on the Tennessee Williams play of the same name, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Paul Newman. Basically, you've got Big Daddy Pollitt, played by Burl Ives, who brings his family around him because he's terminally ill, and his son is the alcoholic former football player Brick, played by Paul Newman, who spends his time basically drinking and avoiding his wife, Maggie the cat, played by Elizabeth Taylor. And it's one of these things where it's a family gathering to say goodbye, obviously, to the dad, but with that comes a lot of sort of memories and sort of family truths and sort of dysfunctions that come out in everyone that's around them. So I think that, for all that, I will just say, first of all, that Elizabeth Taylor's white dress in this is absolutely iconic, and I've always wanted it. I absolutely love it. But I think it's one of these films where Elizabeth Taylor obviously was known for sort of her personal life as opposed to her performances, and Paul Newman is sort of seen as a pin-up. And actually, if you watch this film, you are aware how absolutely brilliant the two of them are, especially together. Like, they have really good, I want to say chemistry, but obviously the characters don't like each other. Brick is emotionally cruel and he's constantly deriding Maggie, and she is literally just begging for affection from him. And it's that kind of wetty, southern, dysfunctional family sort of thing going on. I think it's one of these films where you can tell it's been a play. It's a little bit like Long Day's Journey into Night, which I saw at the film festival. It's got that sort of element in it where you can sort of tell it's been a play. The language is obviously very elevated and things like that. But I just think that the performances are incredible. And there's also, we spoke about this a couple of pods ago about character actors. So there's lots of really, really good character actors in this, Burl Ives being the most obvious one. But then you've got Judith Anderson, who plays Mama Pollitt, or Mama Pollitt, however you say it as well. And I just think it's one of these films where it's a great ensemble cast, and they're all sort of trapped in this one location with each other, and they all just fucking hate each other as well, which I love. And interestingly, the two leads originally considered were Marilyn Monroe and Elvis, which I feel like just sets this film off in an entirely different look. But I definitely think it's one of Elizabeth Taylor's best performances, and Paul Newman's just absolutely flawless. Burl Ives is great in it as well. Again, like just a really well-known character actor. It's not, I would say that on having seen some of it back recently, it can come across like quite hammy. Obviously, it is that kind of high theatre style. But if you enjoy a sort of classic Hollywood drama, it's definitely one worth seeking out. And as a fun fact, which I learned this week, due to the fact that there was a musicians' strike going on in Hollywood at the time, the score is actually all canned pieces from the archives, which I find really interesting because I think the score's quite well known for this, or like quite striking pieces of music. But apparently, it was all sort of cobbled together at the last minute because they couldn't actually get anyone to sort of obviously break the strike and come and score the piece. But yeah, I think it's a great Hollywood classic. Two actors really at the top of their game, and yeah, perfect for an animal title, I think.
Yes, this is one of my favourite films ever. I love this film. Yeah, I remember seeing it for the first time and just being completely blown away by it. Just that it was the two main performances, the way that they interact, and like you say, yes, it is quite stagey because it's basically people in different rooms talking. Yeah, that's all within the one house, but it's the whole like the southern charm of it all, the way that they're all very pleasant to each other outwardly, but there's always this undertone. There's something going on, and obviously it's a power grab. It's happening at the time because Brick's brother wants to take over the company and everything, all that sort of stuff.
Because they think Brick's just this sort of waster, and it's funny. It's one of these performances like Newman does look really like jaded and out of it as well. And as I say, I think because he's known as a sort of pin-up, and Taylor was also known for a private life. But I actually think when you look at their performances in this, they are giving it everything and then some. Yeah,
and I like some of the very quotable lines. Like the odor of mendacity, this. And when they talk about Big Daddy, they don't just say Big Daddy, they say Big Daddy.
Yeah.
Hey, Big Daddy. And Maggie, which is the Elizabeth Taylor character, she's what they call. She is like the cat on a hot tin roof. That's what she is actually described. Maggie the cat.
Yes, they call her that.
It's just fantastic, and I like the Elizabeth Taylor role because she's just longing for some sort of normality, everything just to get back to normal, just to have some sort of connection again with her husband, who she dearly loves, but she fully understands that he has been in a homosexual relationship with one of his friends who killed himself, which is implied throughout the story. I think it's more. I think it's more in the actual stage play. They talk about it a lot more.
This was obviously quite censored, I believe, in order to pass through various like codes and stuff that were set up at the time. I think the play is more obvious that he is not interested in women, shall we say?
Yes, but it's just fantastic. I love this movie. Yeah, it's a very, very good choice.
Thank you very much. It's not often that I make good choices in life. Well, that is everything from us on the Moviescramble pod. If you want to catch up with us, we are on pretty much all the usual social channels: Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, that sort of thing. You can find us at Moviescramble. And if you want to slide into John's DMs, you can email him podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. And if you want to let us know what films you think we should cover, or you would like to leave us a review for the podcast, that would be great as well. All 5 stars are appreciated. If it's less than 5, we're not interested. We're not the Guardian here. And basically, until next time, we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.